Well, the Crows don't have a great record here, Chris, but really took it to Collingwood last week. Is this the biggest test, I guess, of where you're at so far this year?
I find it hard to compare. I think a fortnight ago we were playing Sydney, and our form hadn't been great in the first month. So if I think back to pre that game, I would have said that was a really big test, but I don't really feel any different about this one. Adelaide have been in good form. As to their record here, I mean, teams don't play here very often, and because of that, there's not, I don't think, a relevant sort of piece of work to look at. What is more relevant is how they've gone over the last month, and they've been very good. So it'll be a challenge. But on the other side, we feel like we're playing much better footy than we were early in the season. I think every club around the comp's got their challenges right at the moment, mainly because the competition's so even and there's not much room to move. If you get a few injuries or you're a little bit off in any one game, you can really get hurt, especially against good opposition, which the Crows clearly are.
So just on them, they've got a big 1-2 punch up forward with Tex and Fogarty. Is that been your biggest headache matchup-wise, given you lose Sam and the defensive sort of options that you have at your disposal?
Well, if it were only those two, that would be a challenge, but it'd be easier if they didn't also have Thilthorpe and Rankine and others, and arguably their small forwards have been as big a threat as their marking targets this year. So combine that with Dawson and Laird going really well in the midfield, Keys being an important player for them. Quite quickly, they've become a really solid team. I feel like I'm repeating myself most weeks. When you look at the opposition, you kind of look at it and think, in a way, like you look at the opposition hoping to see all these vulnerabilities, and it just becomes daunting week after week, because you look at them and think, no, they're pretty solid. Their game style looks complete's a strong word, but it's hard to spot sort of holes in what they're doing. Their personnel is strong, and they've got some young talent. So it would be a mistake to kind of think, well, their marking targets up forward just because we've got a few defenders that are out. Needs to be the focus, because then we'll miss other things.
How do you use Mark Blitzards with Segler coming into the ruck? Because he's not only providing a real contest with the ruck, but it seems his inside game and some of the clearance work, he's added that to his game as well too. So are you reluctant to take him out of the middle too much?
Well, for a long time he plays multiple roles, so his position is difficult to describe, but generally we've considered him a midfielder for a long time who can do other things on top of that. So our ruck situation has been one where we've tried to develop some flexibility, which we think is fortunate at the moment because we've lost a couple of guys. And if you depend on one or two and they're out of the team, you can become thin really quickly. So we're fortunate to have Blitzards because he is so flexible, and Segler, we've been up front in the fact that we are very conscious about managing his workloads and keeping him at the point where when we do bring him into AFL footy, he's really ready to play well, and we feel that week is this week, so that's got us excited because that will give us a bit of a different look as well. And there are some flow-ons to how Blitzards will play with Segler as opposed to how he might play with De Koning or Stanley.
In terms of that, the temptation, I know we speak almost every week about that sort of mix in the back line, but with Sam going out, is there that temptation to throw Blitz back into that defensive post to fill the height, or are you more relying on those guys like your Jed Hughes and your Jake Collier-Jackson to sort of play a little bit taller?
A little bit of both. I mean, it's always a conversation for us, and it's nice to know we have it up our sleeve. There's no doubt Blitzards can do it, but with Jack Henry out, who's a flexible player, he would be one that we feel like we could mix and match with a little bit. But it also extends to guys like Mark O'Connor and Zach Guthrie, Tom Stewart. They are flexible because they're tall enough and capable enough to play on those marking targets. So it's a conversation that we've had, and we really respect the strengths of the opposition, but the answer is actually more complicated than the scope of this forum allows for. Things like it's going to be 13 degrees and might be hailing, and that will change. The model that we go with. So we just need to be flexible and agile and sort of think on our feet a little bit and adjust to what the game presents.
If the weather does sort of change and it is quite a wet day, does a laid out sort of suit you guys? And again, with John Segler, I know was out for personal reasons a couple of weeks ago, but does that throw another sort of spanner in the works in regards to that sort of ruck conversation that you have?
I'd be surprised if that happened this week, but that's the way the rules are set up. It's a little bit easier this week when we play Saturday 2 o'clock as opposed to picking a squad on a Thursday night and then not playing until Sunday or Monday. I think when that's the situation, we'll probably make a change. But I doubt we'll make a change this week. And when we've picked a team, knowing what the Geelong weather can be like in May.
Chris, have you settled on your sub? Is it O'Shea Mull?
No, O'Shea, unfortunately, I can make this announcement now, but he just pulled up a little bit sore this morning. So he's going to come out of our squad today. We need to just work through exactly what that means. Suffice to say, he will come out. But it is worth talking about the fact that he was in our squad for a reason, and it was reward for the progress he's making. He's getting a bit closer. So it was never our intention for him to be our sub, but he was close enough to be in the squad. It's just unfortunate. He had a bit of a tight hammy this morning, so we couldn't leave him in the squad if something happens, and he's not available either.
VFL play Sunday. Are there any guys sort of that longer term or medium term that are closer to playing, where we might see Sunday that we haven't seen for a while? I think of Menegola and guys like that. Are we still a little time away?
No, the guys that haven't played for a while are still a way off. So Menegola won't be until the back half or the second half of the season. Jack Henry's sort of shaping up to be around the mid-season bye. Cam Guthrie won't play again this week, but hopefully he's a little bit ahead of those guys. I don't know, help me, Lloyd, is there anyone?
Stanley and Stengel, obviously.
Yeah, so Stanley's more mid-season bye time frame, roughly. This is all very rough. Stengel will be a bit closer, so he's making good progress, and as is often the case with players who have upper body injuries, the benefit is they can run really early, and Tyson was running really quickly post-surgery, so he'll come to hand a lot quicker than the guys that have got sort of lower limb injuries.
Sorry, and Rowan and DeConing, 1-2 weeks sort of?
Yeah, DeConing might be a little longer with that facial fracture, but a bit uncertain in my mind. The medical staff are a bit clearer than I am right at the moment. Given he won't play this week, next week, it's sort of out of my headspace right at the minute. And Gary Rowan's got a very minor hamstring issue that he was able to play through last week, which speaks to the severity or lack thereof. But as we tend to be with players like Gary, it's likely that we'll be more conservative than not with him. And we learned some lessons with him specifically. Last year he missed more footy in the first half of the year than he probably needed to, but when he came back firing. So that is likely to be the course of action we take with him.
Tanner Bruhn comes in for his first full game in almost a month. He got some good action as a sub last week. You've said all along that these are him and Henry are the long-term players, but has he gone away and worked on some things that has impressed you that I'm sure he's personally keen to really lock down a spot?
Yeah, he's impressed me from the day he walked in, and he's a really diligent young man, and I admire the way that he's embraced what we value at our footy club, and I already see in the way he plays sort of some shifts he's made to try to adapt to the things that we prioritise. And so he didn't go out of our team because we thought he had some deficiencies that he needed to go and work on. It was more a matter of we've got a pretty deep midfield, and it was kind of there is no disgrace at all in sort of being moved out of our midfield because Paddy Dangerfield came back in, or those sort of guys. So I think Tanner's going to be a really good long-term prospect for us, and But more than that, I'm really confident that he's going to help us a lot in the short term. I'm looking forward to seeing him play this week.
Chai Clark, Chris.
So you weren't at the press conference post-game last week, and I made a point of saying I am not going to repeat the same mistake when Tom King keeps asking me about Charlie Constable. So Jai's going to be a gun, and we're so excited about him, and I can understand why you're excited about him too, but we're going to let you know when he's playing with plenty of notice, and until I bring it up, I'm not going to talk about him.
Your skipper, Patrick, made some comments about Tasmania yesterday, and it was in his view that he would like to see them have access to contracted players, should those players choose to make a move. Would you be happy to see one of your contracted players leave with no compensation per se, looking ahead to the future?
Yeah, the hypothetical is difficult to think through, and especially, I think it's a really interesting discussion when a new team comes in, and when you have deep thinkers like Paddy, I really respect his footy brain and the way he thinks about the game, and I also respect the fact that he wears a couple of different hats, which we embrace. So I like listening to him talk about the broader game, especially in his role as the player head of the Players Association. But as it relates to those rules, again, I think the conversation's really interesting, but I haven't thought about it enough, and I don't understand the nuance well enough to have a really strong opinion on it. But I'll be honest. Like I actually kind of enjoy the conversations with Pat, and when we've had a brief discussion about it, and you sort of talk through these things from different perspectives, and I guess that the temptation for coaches is to and footy clubs is to answer your specific question. Well, no, you can't have our contracted players. But then when you see it from the players' point of view, and then the broader competition, I don't think there's anyone who's being intellectually honest that would say it's the right thing for the game for Tassie to get a fair crack at being a good team relatively quickly. But then the competitiveness sort of takes over a little bit, and it's like, well, you can have some good players and you can be pretty good, but you just can't have ours and you can't be better than us. Self-interest always takes over. But I think I'll repeat what I've heard from others, and what I genuinely believe, that it's extremely difficult to start a team from scratch, and until you've actually been involved in trying to build a new team in a frontier state, and Tassie's a little bit different because of their history with the AFL, I think you've got to be really careful about having strong opinions on it, because yes, they may have made some mistakes, but it's really hard work. So Tassie, I've got no doubt, will benefit from the fact that the decision makers have learnt a lot from the Gold Coast and the GWS experience, and even the Brisbane Bears and the Swans before them.
Going back to Adelaide, obviously midfield is quite strong in their own rights with Rory Lee and Dawson running through there. There's been teams in the past this season that have tried to tag either one of them. Is that sort of an approach that you guys might take?
Yeah, we might, and you have to respect them. So irrespective of what method we use against those guys, and there are others as well, there's zero chance that we'll just say, well, let's just go and play and let them do whatever they want. They're too good for that. But again, there's some nuance there. It sort of occurs on a spectrum from that really hard tag that everyone can see and it's really clear what you're doing, to a bit more of a subtle sort of approach, which I suspect Adelaide have been taking with Dawson. I mean, you can watch their games and say Dawson's playing on Degoe, but I don't think anyone would refer to that as a hard tag. And in some ways that it's a little bit harder to work out what's going on, but it's certainly not a matter of Adelaide saying we're going to tag Degoe hard with Dawson, the same way it's wrong to say that he's just running off him all day. It's probably somewhere in between all the way. But they're really good players, you're right. I think they were good players last year, but they seem to have improved to me, which, again, the whole competition's daunting because you just look around and you see everyone getting better.
Just very quickly on Paddy's player himself, talking about a player who continues to get better and stay. His last month, what have you made of it. And when there's outside talk about how hungry is this group to go again, the standard he's setting as a captain, it must be pretty impressive in your eyes.
Yeah, I think it can be overplayed both ways. I wouldn't like to be accused of getting defensive in the early rounds, when he wasn't going as well, and then getting overconfident and saying, "Oh, this is an example of great leadership." I think he's probably a little reflective of us as an overall team. A little bit off early, had some work to do. Applied ourselves to some areas that we thought could improve, and now we're starting to see some of the benefits of it. But genuinely, I don't really spend any time, unless I'm briefed on it, sort of worrying about what others might be saying. I'm certainly not motivated by it, and I think that's sometimes coaches can come across as being defensive of their players, and I get why. But for me, it's kind of, I would hate us to ever sound like we're saying we're motivated because someone had a go at Paddy and now he's showing them, who's boss. I think he's a bit more sophisticated than that. But yeah, I think it's a good point. He's playing good footy and is really important to us. I still think the best form of leadership is to play well yourself. But it comes with accountability too, doesn't it? If you go through a bit of a lean patch, you'll be accused of not leading the team as well as you could.